Hello, I'm Edmund Demarche. I'm with Professor Mohammad Marandi from the University of Tehran. Professor Mohammad Marandi, thank you for joining the Trends Journal.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
There seems to be some kind of lost in communication headline writing in the West. The big story on Drudge Report last night was Iran stating that it is already at war it's waging total war against the US, Europe, and Israel. And the first story that came out about that subject, at least in the West, happened about 24 hours before that, where it translated the Iranian president saying that the West and Israel is at war with Iran. So is this some kind of lost in translation moment that we're having in the West? Obviously, for the reading public in the United States, it's a lot different from one to the other. Can you explain to us what the Iranian president said?
It's intentional. Nothing has been lost in translation. This is a media that's largely, if not completely, controlled by Zionists. They dictate what is written, and it's becoming even worse now. Like what you've seen in CBS, only doesn't change anything substantially. CBS was always, for example, anti-Iran and pro-Israel. Now it's a touch more pro-Zionist than before. It's not as if there's been some huge shift. So anything that you read in any media outlet, mainstream, legacy media outlet, in the United States about Iran, it will 99 out of 100 times, it will be a combination of disinformation and misinformation, or just sheer disinformation. So the president said the obvious, that basically the United States, the Europeans, and the Israeli regime are at war with the Iranian people, just as they've been at war with the Syrian people, the Palestinian people, the Lebanese people, people of Yemen. They are at war with the Iranians. And Western media, American media, changes this at a time when Netanyahu is coming to town, so as to strengthen his argument. I saw something today in this Zionist-controlled media outlet. I don't look at the website, but someone sent me a link where a media outlet called Iran International, which is just pure disinformation and hostile to Iran and the Iranian people. It said that Iran is now, their sources or something like that, sources or intelligence says that the Iranians are now putting chemical and biological weapons into their missiles. We know what this is all about. It's about, it's just like Iraq in 2003. So anything that you hear in Western media or anything given out by Western governments, don't take it seriously.
Can you talk to me about this all stems from a report earlier this month on NBC News, and they broke the story about Israel being unhappy with Iran's ballistic missile production. And I guess the argument there is that if Iran's missile systems and capabilities get too strong, they're not going to be able to stop its nuclear program in the future. I guess that might be the argument that Netanyahu is bringing forward to Trump. There's a person from a think tank by the name of Trita Parsi, who said this is the equivalent. He kind of mocked the idea of that, and he said this is the equivalent of bombing a cutlery factory in Tehran because of the dangers of kitchen knives. I suppose I'd love to hear your opinion on that new Israeli argument and whether or not you think Trump will be convinced by that during his meeting with Netanyahu this week in Mar-a-Lago.
Well, Trump doesn't need to be convinced about anything. He has the information, but he lies, and so does the U.S. government. So does Israel. And actually, Mr. Tritaparsi's example is not really a very good one, because Iran's nuclear program is peaceful. It's not a knife. Actually, I've begun a series on Al Mayadeen TV, a weekly series, and in one of them, the most recent one, I did a 21-minute monologue on the Iranian nuclear program and its history. And I point out that the program was initiated by the Americans. And before the revolution, the Iranians were building their infrastructure very expensive, too expensive. The Iranians back then under the Shah were sort of like the Arabs on the other side of the Persian Gulf, just throwing away their money and getting expensive goods from the West and being ripped off all the time. That's what the Shah was doing. But they were building an infrastructure. The French, the Germans, and the Americans were at the forefront. And then when the revolution happened, they stopped, and then they tried to block Iran's nuclear program. And the International Atomic Energy Agency has never said and has never shown any evidence that Iran's nuclear program has ever been anything but peaceful. And Iran had numerous agreements with the West, which I explain in that show. People can find it on Mayadeen English, both on YouTube and Twitter, and I guess elsewhere. It's called Demystifying Iran. Every time the United States and the West, they disregard their commitments, and the Iranians abide by their commitments. And it's not just the JCPOA. So Iran is demonized because Iran is independent. If it's not the nuclear program, it's the missile program. If it's not the missile program, it's terrorism. If it's not terrorism, they'll make up something. But the problem that Iran has is that it is independent and that it is opposed to ethno-supremacism and ethnic cleansing. That's it, basically. Does the United States care about democracy? Of course not. They support dictators across the world. That's been a very old tradition. In our region, they support all the dictatorships on the other side of the Persian Gulf. They're all family dictatorships, every single one of them. And then if you go to Jordan and Egypt and across the Arab world, all these dictatorships are preserved with Western support. But they don't care about democracy. Do they care about human rights? Of course not, because the Israeli regime and many of these dictatorships, but the Israeli regime slaughters people. They're carrying out a Holocaust, but there are no sanctions. There's no punishment. There are only apologists in the Western media trying to justify the slaughter of women and children. And now, as we speak, people are being killed and people are being denied food and medicine in Gaza. Back then, the excuse was that there's fighting going on. Now there's no fighting, but they're not allowing food and medicine and supplies to get in, but Western media has walked away and they're looking elsewhere. So none of this is based on truth or reality. That their narratives. The reality is that in 1979 there was a revolution. People wanted independence because the U.S. and the U.K. brought the Shah to power through a coup and then created a dreaded secret police called the Sabak. And after the revolution, Iran was supporting the resistance in southern Africa against apartheid and the Palestinian people against the apartheid regime in occupied Palestine. These are the issues that bother and anger the United States. And you know better than I that the entire Western media apparatus is owned and controlled by oligarchs, the super wealthy, and ultimately they have the same thing. They say the same thing. If the Democrats, they may fight with the Republicans on minor issues at home, but if the Republicans bomb a country, the liberal media will support it. If the liberals or Democrat president starts bombing another country, the conservative media will support the strikes. You'll never see. I mean, just like in Venezuela, no one is outraged except for maybe one senator and one congressman. When you look at Nigeria, the same. They bomb a sovereign country and it's all fine and well. And I remember when Trump first bombed Syria in support of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, immediately the media, his opponents, who were saying he was an agent of Putin back then, started praising him. And I remember they would say that he's finally become the US president. And one person, I forget his name, said, we're guided by the beauty of our weapons, or, this is just how it is. So one shouldn't take anything that comes from Western media seriously. And the Iranians are preparing themselves. I don't know if there will be military conflict because Iran is far more prepared now than it was back then. And the United States has lots of trouble. It's gathered its navy off the coast of Venezuela, and can't just move everything around overnight. It is losing the war in Ukraine, regardless of the fact that Trump is trying to distance himself from the war. But when Ukraine loses, it will be a catastrophe for NATO, the EU, and the United States. And in our region, the outrage, and across the world, the outrage against the Israeli regime is very much there. So any conflict with Iran under current circumstances, and with the problems that the United States has at home over the economy, and of course Trump's problems with Epstein and all that, it makes it very difficult. But that doesn't mean it won't happen. It's possible, and that's why the Iranians are preparing themselves.
Yeah, because I saw back to your point about how the mainstream media celebrates these, war efforts. If you look at the Daily Mail right now, their cover is Christmas delivery, and it's about Venezuela being bombed in its first airstrike, the U.S. first airstrike on Venezuela. And I'm like, see, look that's how media presents these things.
Yeah.
It's a Christmas delivery, a bomb.
The Catholic country.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Venezuela, as I'm sure you know, Edmund, and I'm sure your viewers who are politically aware know, Venezuela is a Christian country. I've been to Venezuela multiple times. It is predominantly Catholic. The government is actually much more, how should I put it, much more open to speaking, government leaders, the president speaking about Christ, Jesus, God, than European leaders are. So expressing religiosity in Venezuela by the state is much greater than in Europe, and probably the United States and Canada. So their Christmas gift is to bomb these fishermen and these people on boats who probably for the most part if have nothing to do with drugs. And we all know that the boats that were destroyed, none of them can reach the United States. And the United States has never produced any evidence that any of them contain drugs. I read somewhere that the U.S. Coast Guard, when it boards ships, 25 to 30% of the boats, they're clean. That's the Coast Guard, whose job is to check boats off the coast of the United States. These boats are off the coast of Venezuela, very far away. So obviously they don't have the sort of intelligence that the Coast Guard would have off the coast of the United States. So if it's 20, 25, 30% off the coast of the United States, assuming that there really isn't some sort of intention to bomb boats that have drugs, which would be illegal anyway and murder anyhow. But even if that intention existed, then we can assume that the number of boats that are completely clean and have nothing to do with drugs are well over 25 and 30%.
We once spoke before, and we imagined a U.S.-Israel strike on Iran, and you told me that Iran would obviously stand up to it, and its target would be the Gulf states. That would be if something ever escalated to a very high level. Can you just go over that, and has your prognosis there changed at all? Would a U.S./Israel strike on Iran result in a catastrophe for the Gulf, for the oil supply? Can you explain that?
Well, during the 12-day war, the Iranians hit the Israeli regime harder than they hit Iran. I mean, you can drive around Tehran for hours every day for a week, and you will never find damage anywhere. Unless someone tells you that there is this building on this side, in this side street, and you drive there and see, that they're rebuilding it or fixing the damage, you won't even know, because the city of Tehran is huge, and the payload of the bombs that the Israeli regime used is much smaller. But I have American friends who've spoken to Israelis, and they say the damage in Tel Aviv is huge. So the Iranians have hit them very hard. So when the Israeli regime hits Iran, Iran hits back. The Americans carried out one attack on 3 sites. Trump keeps saying that he obliterated the nuclear program, but of course the head of the National Intelligence Agency did not confirm that, and he was removed, the Defense Intelligence Agency. So, conclude whatever, anyone conclude whatever they like about Trump's claim, but that's beyond the point. Iran's missile capabilities are very extensive, and they're spread out across the country, and they are in many underground bases that are very large complexes. So if the Americans would want to attack Iranian missile bases, it would be war. And and when the Americans struck Iran once, the Iranians struck back at Qatar, the US base there, and did severe damage. 6 missiles hit, and they destroyed a key US radar installation and so on there. But if there's a war, then Iran will do to the US much more damage, infinitely more damage than last time around. And one has to remember that Iran's military its missile and drone capabilities is not focused on Israel. Most of Iran's capabilities, in fact, the vast majority of Iran's missile and drone capabilities are directed at US forces in the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. Why? Because the United States has been threatening Iran with invasion and attack for 3 decades. So Iran has huge numbers of short-range missiles, medium-range missiles in underground bases that have nothing to do with the Israeli regime. And they're spread out across the Persian Gulf region. And therefore, and drones. So if the United States wages war, then all these regimes, they are complicit. How can they not be complicit? They host bases of the enemy that's waging war. So that would mean a catastrophe for the global market. I've been saying this for years. So if the United States goes the United States goes to attack Iran and wages war on Iran, then I think that's the end of the global economy. I think that will make 1929 look like a mild recession or a recession. Also, from my understanding, and I don't have this from military sources it's not anything secret. It's just from people who I know who are usually not ill-informed, but it's not insider information, that Iran is developing and has been very swiftly developing or expanding bases, underground bases, in the east and the northeast of the country. And it's installing longer range missiles there. So in future, Iran will have more options to fire from deep inside Iran. And that means that any attack on Iran would have to go deep inside the country. So in the past, for example, the Israelis would, let's say if they wanted to fire missiles from Syria or from Iraq, now they'd have to go far deeper. And that would put them more at risk. And the same would be true with the Americans. But the main issue is that Iran's focus is on the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean and the Strait of Hormuz. And the Persian Gulf is not wide, and Iran owns half of it. That's why it's called the Persian Gulf, because all the countries on the other side combined, they don't own as much as Iran does. They don't so it is very easy for Iran to destroy everything. They've been preparing themselves, and now that we've had war, Iran knows its strengths. It's working to build on those strengths, and Iran has seen its weaknesses, and it's working to deal with those weaknesses. A war in the future would be more disastrous for the Israeli regime and whoever supports it than the war a few months ago.
I read an article before we spoke from the New York Times about the Iranian economy, how the currency is at a very low point and inflation is very high. Can you explain what has Trump's sanctions, have they been effective for the Trump administration in choking Iran? He said that I think they wanted to apply a maximum pressure campaign early on in his presidency against Iran. Has he been successful in doing that? How's the economy in Iran at the moment?
This is not something new. This is what Biden was doing. It was maximum pressure under Biden. It was maximum pressure under Trump before Biden. It was maximum pressure under Obama until the JCPOA. But then Obama didn't remove the sanctions that he was supposed to. He cheated Iran. So Iran, even during that brief period of time when the JCPOA was being implemented, Iran never got that benefits that it was supposed to get because Obama lied. So the U.S. has been waging war against ordinary Iranians for many years, just like in Cuba, just like in all the countries that it is hostile towards. And the New York Times and other media outlets hides the fact that this is a war against children. It's a war against the vulnerable. It's a war against families, because the target is ordinary people, just like the Israelis when they try to starve the people of Gaza, as they're doing right now. This is how the West wages war. But while it is tough for the Iranian economy, the Iranian economy is growing. And I believe that with the changes that we're seeing across the globe and the move away from the West, the US ability to sanction Iran is decreasing. So what we're seeing today is the problems that have existed for years due to the sanctions. But I think that in 2 or 3 years' time, we're going to see a very different situation. We're already seeing it happen, but it's going to take time for it to have an impact on Iranian society in a clear way. So the United States obviously will use people to create unrest. They'll try to strangle the economy and then fund people to create chaos. That's what they always do. But that's not going to bring about any change in Iran. In fact, the only thing that it's going to do is it's going to push Iranian government to focus more on non-Western governments and to deprioritize the West even further, because they see that anything that has to do with the West, any Western embassy, any Western government, is only going to lead to them trying to harm the country. And the 12-day war, I think, actually that brought about a big shift. I think that some people in Iran, a significant number of elites in Iran, who continue to try to prioritize some sort of deal with the West, they have come to the conclusion that the West is just not trustworthy. And so we have to focus on BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and with developing ties with countries in the global majority. That is the new consensus, and I think that is going to have an impact in the years ahead.
And my last question, Professor, is what's the feeling like in Tehran when people are just walking around the street and finding out that they may be bombed by Israel, there might be new strikes? Do you get a sense of this is just business as usual walking around Tehran, or is there a little bit more of a heightened security concern out there? What's the feeling like when I can't imagine seeing that your country is potentially going to be bombed again, and just going about my daily life with any kind of ease? What's that feeling like at the moment in Iran?
If you walk from my house let's say, how far can you walk? Let's say 3 kilometers in any direction. You will probably not see a single police officer or a police car. The only car that you'll see that you will probably think is a police car is a traffic cop, because they look similar, and they don't carry guns. So Iran has far less police police presence, Tehran, for example, than in New York. It's just they're you cannot even compare them, or London, or I've never been to Paris, but from what I hear, Paris and other major cities. Life is normal. People do their business. It is a very beautiful city, Tehran. Actually, it snowed in the mountains last night, so if you look from the city, the mountains are all white, and it's a pretty city. The traffic is horrific. It's absolutely horrific, but life is normal here. It is tough for government employees and workers people with fixed wages. The government gives huge subsidies, though, something that people, I don't think, outside of Iran and even inside of Iran sort of appreciate. For example, the gasoline that you get is 1 cent a gallon. A liter. Yes, yeah.
I'm in Los Angeles, and it's like $5.79 per premium.
Yeah. So
Right.
it's just, and the same is true with electricity, which is heavily subsidized, and natural gas, which all homes have. All homes have natural gas, and it's almost for free. So while life is difficult in many ways, as I said, for people who have fixed earnings and who don't have high-paying jobs, but these realities also exist. But as I said, the United States and the Europeans and the Israelis, Western embassies, they're always working to undermine Iran in any way possible. And every now and then you will have unrest, because they're trying to strangle the economy. But the very fact that they're trying to strangle Iran the very fact that they're trying to strangle women and children shows that actually the Islamic Republic is legitimate in the eyes of ordinary people. Otherwise, they wouldn't try to strangle people to make them rise up. Because what they are trying to do is make people so miserable and desperate that they will rise up and overthrow the state. Meaning that if things are normal and people have a normal lifestyle and the economy is functioning normally, that won't happen. So, in a sense, in a sort of strange way, the West is acknowledging Iran's strength. But I think that actually, in the long run, what the West has done is that it has pushed Iran to take the rise of Asia, BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization more seriously. And I think countries that are lagging behind in this shift are going to be losers. So the West has effectively made Iran take this changing world more seriously and to think of how to be a part of this change.
Professor Mohammad Marandi, thank you so much for joining the Trench Journal. It's always great to hear your opinion on these matters.
Thank you for having me, Edmund. Merry Christmas. And also, I hope that you and your viewers have a very good New Year. And if you have any Orthodox Christians or Armenians that are watching, I hope they have a Merry Christmas because theirs is on the 6th and the 7th.